Yet when you think about, well, what will bring that market anomaly to an end is certainly if enough people request their physical metals back. And now you're seeing it not just, individual retail investors, but central banks. The land of Arcadia. Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you on Friday, April 27th for today's Arcadia Weekly Market Wrap-Up. Some fascinating things going on in the gold and silver markets and also the cryptos, which continue to rally. So with that said, let's dig right in and catch you up on what has been going on this week. Here on Miles Franklin, I wrote an article last week mentioning how the Hungarians have asked for their gold back, which is a growing list now of countries that are essentially saying, we want our gold. We don't want to hold it at the Fed or in Paris, which certainly makes a lot of sense. And along those lines, last month we saw Hungary, and then this week, now we see Turkey is going to repatriate its gold from the U.S. in an attempt to ditch the dollar. On one hand, not surprising given what's been going on. On the other hand, completely shocking that we're hearing these things. And at the same time, the market just stays there, which to me seems like a great warning sign. And perhaps worth noting here is the quote of the Turkish president, Erdogan. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but hopefully you get close enough. And he mentions, why do we make all loans in dollars? Let's use another currency. I suggest that the loans should be made based on gold. If you had maybe one country saying this, or, some small nation that didn't really have as much clout in the financial world, maybe you could ignore it. But as again, you see, I believe they have the list of countries after Venezuela, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands have repatriated their gold. Again, I mentioned that Hungary did the same last week. China is doing everything possible to stack up gold. They're creating petro-yuan arrangements to walk away from the dollar. Iran is banning the dollar. And here, in case you're confused why, he's saying it as clearly as possible, let's use another currency. They're getting tired of the reign of King Dollar, which certainly, I was born in America. I've lived here the majority of my life. And it's not like I grew up with some vendetta against America, which, it's often sad, I think, to see these things going on, and it's not that I'm not proud of my country. It's more the government that I am not proud of. And you can see that the rest of the world is starting to notice. And perhaps the reason why I find this as significant as I do is that when you talk, obviously I've talked a lot about how it seems like we're headed towards some sort of eventual resolution in these precious metals markets. Continue to hear estimates that for every ounce of gold or silver, there is somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 paper claims. And really, again, we've sat here for the last couple of years seeing the prices not move and reflect that. Yet when you think about, well, what will bring that market anomaly to an end is certainly if enough people request their physical metals back. And now you're seeing it not just, individual retail investors, but central banks. And so far, if we look at the actual price of the metals, this hasn't been reflected yet. You can see gold still sitting around $1,300. Which I guess has a couple different perspectives. Certainly if you've owned metals for years and you've been waiting, I can understand your frustration. Although to the degree that, again, if you think about how people were frustrated in 2008, mortgage bubble comes along, most were caught off guard. And in hindsight, I think a lot of people wish they could go back in time and perhaps position their investments differently. But while maybe you can't do that, really spotting the next one, and it's amazing how similar all these factors are, the signs are there. So Be interesting to see how that develops going forward, but certainly a lot of pressure indicating that while maybe the timing is still unclear, for all the reasons that you may have bought gold or silver or ever thought about doing it, they're just more in force than ever. And again, don't take my word for it, but look at what really some of the larger investment flows are doing now and take that as you will. Again, why would there be a need to do such a thing? Well, certainly of note this week is that interest rates up again, actually did cross that 3% barrier. They're in a little bit today to about, let's call it 2.96%. You saw after that last Fed meeting, the bond market rallied, meaning yields were lower for a bit, although that has reversed. As I was expecting, perhaps took about a month longer than I expected, but again, you see these yields rising. Starting to see a lot of coverage of the rising yields as we continue to see stock market sell-offs in response. And in that coverage, a lot of people have talked about 3% being a key threshold that should rates go higher than 3%, which if foreign creditors are walking away from the auction, at the same time, the Fed is supposedly not monetizing all the debt, certainly would be expected. Now, at the same time, perhaps my comment on that is that I don't know that it's going to be like you cross 3% and all of a sudden the bubbles collapse, but certainly that it's bringing more attention. People are becoming aware of what's going on. We'll see how rates go over the next couple of months or so, but should they continue to go higher? Again, the simplest way I phrase it is that the more rates go up, the more likely the bubbles are to pop, and the sooner that that's likely to occur. And why would that be? Certainly, here's one primary reason. We see weekly mortgage applications stall as rates make a sharp move higher. Again, I'd say the real estate data has been somewhat mixed. Again, not the easiest thing to determine based on 1 month of data, 1 or 2 months of data, especially when its data is flawed as what we get from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But certainly, again, with rates going up, this is what you would expect. And certainly, I've actually been thinking about starting, I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but certainly thinking about whether it's time to begin shorting real estate in some fashion. I'll get back to you on that one. I'm close, not there yet, but definitely keeping an eye on it. For the same reason, again, that as rates went up in 2006, 2007, 2008, you finally saw the bubble begin to come down, and seems like we're on track for that again. If we look at our cryptos here, certainly they've been rallying recently. Bitcoin over 9,000, Litecoin at $1.50. So a little flat on the week, but overall, again, considering Bitcoin was down below 7,000 a couple weeks ago, for all those guys out there saying it's a bubble and they're tulip mania, well, prices have gone back up and maybe in a good way, somewhat stabilized a little bit. Because again, I know it went from 6,000 to 20,000 back to 6,000, yet when people are talking about the bubble being, cryptos being done, it's not as if the market has exactly ended. And why would that be? Again, for all of the reasons just discussed, another form of alternative currency. And along those lines, the simplest way I think of it, I don't do really any short-term trading in the cryptos. Pretty much I've picked the ones I like the best and plan on leaving them as long as possible. And here we see Litecoin accepted here, a massive campaign deployed by Litecoin. Because in the end, if people start using it is what it's really going to come down to. And from my perspective, looking at the dollar system, that I've yet to figure out a way that that's long-term sustainable. And so when you have that happening and cryptos growing at the same time. And it's interesting, Litecoin starting a Litecoin accepted campaign here. So really doing some marketing to get more people to begin actually using the cryptos, because that's the price. There's the price element, which there's a lot of speculation and trading going on. Yet in the end, if the technology continues to be adopted and it's the replacement for what we have, if that's the case, then certainly the prices will necessarily have to go up. And here we see WikiLeaks now accepting Litecoin donations, which is kind of interesting because certainly it's really that alternative community that's more likely to begin using these things now, and WikiLeaks certainly fitting into that. So we'll keep an eye on the continued adoption. Another thing worth noting, tried to find an internet link to this, although it's an email newsletter I get, but just wanted to share part of this. Amazon announces blockchain services. Again, there's been speculation that they may accept Bitcoin or Litecoin at some point. No official confirmation on that yet, but following their recent earnings call, we can see, while the company did not specifically mention cryptocurrency on its call, just last week it announced it would be introducing a series of tools that allow users to create, deploy, and manage blockchain networks on the Amazon services. So remember, we want Amazon to announce it will begin accepting cryptocurrency, which would be really a bigger sign, but you know, just little small footprints that we're getting closer. And takeaway, payment technology represents an opportunity that's way too big for them to ignore, mainly because you can see here he compares it to some of the typical fees for credit card companies on every transaction, of which Litecoin in particular comes out a little bit less. So again, not always the easiest trading and investing environment, but if you're looking about, rather than just guessing whether they're going up or not, thinking about what is a way to at least begin deciding what makes sense, I continue to look at the adoption. And for anyone else that is interested in learning more about cryptos, or really what life could be like without the deep state and all of these other forces running our lives and world, I will be at the Libertopia Festival this May 3rd through 6th. That's next week in San Diego. Really a lot about, as they call it, voluntarius, which is perhaps an extension of the libertarian school of thought. Although if you look at the schedule, a lot of stuff about cryptos, a lot of gold and silver, a lot of free living. So if you click there, it looks like my internet's a little slow today, but you could take a look through the schedule yourself. Let's see, here we go. But a lot of good stuff there. I'm excited to be heading out there and meet other folks that have this similar view of the future. Certainly the developments taking place indicate that we're on schedule to get there, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds. So leave your comments below. I'd love to hear what's on your mind and what we can help clear up going forward. But certainly exciting times. Certainly I like these levels for precious metals or cryptos as usual, primarily because the events continue to unfold in a manner that indicates an outcome that would be quite favorable to both of those asset classes. So with that said, we're going to wrap up, but I do hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week, probably filming live from Libertopia. So it should be a lot of fun. If you make it out there, please do come and say hello, and I will see you next week.